Environmental defenders face many risks while protecting Jamaica's natural resources. They often lack adequate access to justice, information, and meaningful participation in decision making. That's where the Escazú Agreement comes in. It's a landmark regional treaty, a game changer designed to ensure greater access to information, justice, meaningful participation in decision making, and stronger protections for environmental defenders. Hello, my global family. Welcome to this special podcast series called Defending Our Rights Environmental Justice in Jamaica, brought to you by the Jamaica Environment Trust in collaboration with Global Yadi, with support from the UNDP implemented Global Environment Facility Small Grants Program. So, this series will explore what the SEC means for Jamaica, its role in securing environmental rights, protecting defenders, and ensuring or strengthening rather public participation. So, Jamaica has taken steps towards transparency in the environment and justice, but what will it take to officially ratify the Escazú Agreement? What are the concrete actions needed to move forward? In this episode, we speak with Nicole Leotaud, the elected representative of the public for the Escazú Agreement, and we're going to explore the next steps for ratification, the insight from the situation analysis surrounding Escazú, and how is it that Escazú can strengthen Jamaica's commitment to environmental justice and sustainable development. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
All right. We're happy to hear that. So for starters, what does it mean to be the elected representative of the public for the Escazú Agreement?
Okay, so I am one of 6 elected representatives of the public. And what that means is this treaty is all about involving the public in environmental management. So following that model, the implementation of the treaty itself pays attention to how the public can be involved in implementation of the treaty. So we have these 6 elected representatives, 2 from the Caribbean. I am one, and my wonderful colleague Bishnu Tulsi from St. Lucia is the other one from the Caribbean. And our role is really to facilitate, promote, support the members of the public to know about the Escazú Agreement, to understand how they can be involved, to give their voice on issues regarding implementation, and to help represent them in the treaty. And so we were elected by members of the public who voted in November 2022. And we serve a 4-year term. So we have another year or a bit to go, helping the public to know about the treaty and be involved.
That's quite fitting for what the treaty represents, stronger participation. And so I don't want to think because I'm in my bubble, I'm hearing a lot about Escazú. How would you describe the current engagement and momentum in the region at the moment?
So I think most people don't know about it, even certainly in the public and civil society. The programs like what you're doing now are so important, but, most people don't know about it. And even government agencies who are involved in environmental management in different ways, especially not the main sector, so tourism or water or land management, they don't know about it. So there needs to be much more done. The treaty came into force since 2021 on 22nd of April, so Earth Day. And considering we're in 2025, this is not something a lot of people are familiar with, but it's so wonderful. It's our first environmental treaty in the region. So it should be a big deal to protect our right to a healthy environment. But I think it's, unfortunately, we're not there yet. So we need to get a lot more people aware about it.
I definitely agree, especially seeing that one of the other critical elements of this treaty is to ratify it, especially for countries obviously who haven't done so. So what are the key steps that are required for ratification, and is there a timeline attached to this?
Now, I'm not a legal expert, but just to let you know, I went and checked, and so there are 33 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Remember, it's a big regional treaty. And of the 33, 18 countries have so far committed as a party. They've signed on, so they've fully ratified and are a party. So Jamaica has signed. I checked the date when Jamaica signed it. I think it was, let me give you the exact date. They signed on the 26th of September 2019. So that was the first step. They said, yes, this is something we're interested in. Now, normally, the way I understand it is after you sign, you then go back into your national process and get whatever permissions are needed. For example, if Parliament needs to approve joining a treaty, whatever needs to happen at the national level, the next step is normally ratification. And so I don't know. I don't think there's a timeline or a set process because every country is different. But there are some countries like Bahamas. Bahamas just joined as a party. Bahamas had not signed before, so they jumped that signing step and they would have joined by accession. It's the same thing, these words. You've made the full commitment to be a party and part of the Escazú Agreement. So there are 9 Caribbean countries that are already fully committed as parties. Jamaica has signed, but has not yet taken that final step and committed.
All right. And I guess that's part of why we're having this conversation too, to see that we get people informed, encourage meaningful participation so that we can support the ratification. And so just as you mentioned, happy to hear that a few countries have already ratified and started the implementation process. But going back to participation of the public, that's a challenge that still exists. Why do you think this is the case? In terms of public participation, it's always something that is prioritized but lacking in some way.
Yeah, but I think it's easier said than done. The first step is to commit to say, yes, this is something we want to do. So countries that have signed on to Escazú Agreement or have something in their national policies and legislation, most national policies now commit to public participation in some form, but it's much harder to do well, as we know. I work for Caribbean Natural Resources Institute, and a lot of our work is this focus on how to do participation well in the environmental field. And so once countries do sign on, it doesn't mean, this is very important, you don't have to be perfect to join as a party. So Jamaica does not have to have everything in order in terms of its national legislation or full capacity or systems in place. What it's doing by signing on is committing to do that. And then every party is given help and support to get their systems in place. There's a whole process to develop an implementation plan. What are the laws and policies that need strengthening? What are the systems? Who needs capacity building? Is it the judiciary? Is it government agencies? Is it the police? So that whole process really takes time. It takes resources, but that very important first step, I think, of making the commitment is what the citizens of Jamaica would like to see. They would like to see the government commit to say this is something we believe is important. We believe it's important for Jamaicans to be able to access information, to participate and access justice in environmental matters, to protect their right to a healthy environment. So I think that first step is what's critical. And then it takes time, it takes resources to really know how to do it well.
Right. So for people who we're trying to bring awareness to through this episode and others, I think the question they're going to ask is, even though you explain all of that, why has Jamaica not signed, or what are the delays then that affect the ratification process? I don't know if you have any different insight from what you just mentioned.
Not really. I know some countries hesitate to sign on to something if they don't have a strong legal framework in place. But for example, I'm Trinidad and Tobago, and we have everything in place, and still we haven't even signed, far less ratified. And you definitely do not have to have that in place before signing. So I think it's like everything, it's political will. How much of a priority is this for a government? And I firmly believe citizens have a right to say what's important in their country. And so Jamaicans need to speak out and say, is this important to you all? And how so? And to make your political representatives really aware of why you think this can help Jamaica be a better place.
Right. So, and maybe my next question would also help the public to understand the implications and other environmental defenders. For these advocates and environmental defenders, what are the typical mechanisms or protections that the Escazú Agreement can strengthen if we ratify?
Right. So I'm not a lawyer again. To me, I keep it very simple, right? The main thing we want is to protect our right to a healthy environment, right? That's very important. It's a human right now recognized globally, but it's not in most countries' legislation or constitution. But then there are three things. In order to protect your right to a healthy environment, you need to have a voice and say, what you think is important and how you're being impacted. The first thing is you need to access information. And that's not technical, confusing reports, 1,000 pages. It's not in, something in somebody's office that you can't access. It needs to be information for you in your community. What's happening to your forest, to your river, to your beach, to your ocean? What's happening to the air you breathe? This is a basic right. We live, and we have a right to know what's happening. So, for example, the Escazú Agreement says things like people should be able to ask for information without having to explain it and justify it and be put under some kind of pressure. And more so, going the next step, countries really need to get to the point of publishing information on pollutants in our country. There's something called a pollutant register. We need to have state of the environment reports. So people at a basic level, step one, you need to have information about what's going on, affecting the environment and affecting you and your life and your well-being. And step two then is now you have the information, you need to be able to say something. You need to be able to give your opinion. I'm concerned about this. I think this should be a priority. This should not. Whatever your opinion is, you have a right to say that. We have freedom of speech. It's a basic human right. The same thing, freedom to participate in decision making, right? And have your opinion heard and considered, including like local knowledge. You don't have to be a fancy scientist to have an opinion about protecting your river, or protecting your beach, or protecting your forest, right? Your opinion counts, your voice counts, your local knowledge counts. And so this public participation is about how can we really make that easy? So not having a consultation in Kingston, people in rural communities where things are happening need to be able to be involved and say what they think and give their opinion, So it's about making that process work. So people's opinions are heard, and then no matter what the decision that's taken, because a decision might be taken, like if I give my opinion, people don't like my opinion, that doesn't count. A decision is taken that's not my opinion, but explain to me why. So that's something that often I find doesn't happen in the Caribbean. People say, I go to all these consultations, I give my opinion, and I don't think they listen to me, right? But there may be very good factors at play as to why, a decision is taken. Tell me why. Is it an economic issue? Is it some other bigger issue that I don't understand, right? So feed that back to me. That's all part of it. And then step 3 is access to justice. If I feel my rights are being harmed by environmental decisions, I need to be able to go to a court or go to some kind of mediation and say, listen, I am concerned about my right to a healthy environment. I'm concerned about my human rights. I want justice. All right? So that process, again, is really important. And we all know the courts in our countries are overloaded. There's limited capacity. They have huge caseloads. So how can we make this process easier and really make people feel, I have rights and my rights are protected? So that's a real simple thing. It's a very simple agreement if you think about it. You don't have to be a lawyer to say, I want to live in a healthy environment. So it's about protecting those rights.
Right. And so thanks for giving us that clarity. And I feel like my next question may touch on some of that because, again, you made it, I don't want to say sound so simple because, as you said, it's simple. But how is it that civil society can sustain that momentum in holding the government accountable? Mm-hmm. I know obviously attending a public, the consultation is one, but are there other ways that they can sustain this momentum?
I think there's many ways, and for example, the media is really important. Having these national debates about what's important for your country, is really important. And there's always holding their government to account, but also supporting. Also, how can you feed into development of policies or feed into development of systems or help collect information? So there's all kind of dimensions to it. And civil society has a long history of holding government accountable for implementation of laws and policies, right? That's what we have to do. But with the Escazú Agreement, remember, it's a regional treaty. So what is also important there is the public has a voice at the meetings of the parties, so the conference of the parties or the COPs. The public can attend. You can apply and attend, and people from Jamaica have attended in the past. And if not, I'm one of the elected representatives. If you can't attend, you contact me and say, hello, Nicole, I want you to talk about this concern I have. That's my job. So have your voice heard at that level. But for the Escazú Agreement is also very interesting in that within the agreement, they have there's one of their bodies. It's called the Committee to Support Implementation and Compliance. So just like it sounds, it's a committee of independent legal experts who really look at the Escazú Agreement and are trying to support the countries, the parties. How can they implement it properly? And so they do this, they create special reports. They might have special reports that countries ask them to do, or they may see the need for, or the elected representatives and the public can ask them, do a report and look at this implementation issue. And there's also something they call communications, where if a country or a member of the public has a concern about a country that has signed on to the agreement. Remember, you have to be a party. If you have a concern, my country has signed on and is not meeting its obligations. It's not doing what it said it would. It's not meeting its promises. You go to the committee and you raise this concern. You submit a report. They have a whole complicated process. And the committee then investigates and then will make recommendations to the government, to the party, and say, we got a complaint that your public consultation process for EIAs is too cumbersome, whatever, I don't know. And they'll investigate it and then give a report to government and say, this is what we think you need to do to address this. So I think that's a very interesting mechanism within Escazú Agreement. And then also remember, once a government has signed on to the Escazú Agreement, it's made that promise to its people. And that promise holds. And we have seen where in international courts now, where civil society in countries have appealed a decision of their government. So I'm thinking of the Barbuda case, where they went to the High Court of Appeal as a Privy Council in the UK, right, for Antigua and Barbuda. And that court cited the Escazú Agreement and said, hey, Antigua and Barbuda, you've committed to these things. Therefore, you need to follow up on what you promised, and you need to allow the people of Barbuda to have a voice in. They're very concerned about development on the island of Barbuda, and they wanted to simply have a voice. So the Escazú Agreement can even go to the international level and say, the government has committed to these things, and so it needs to protect its citizens and follow what it promised.
I love that, because when I asked that question, I thought that you were going to give other examples. Oh, the public can do this, the public can do that. Mm-hmm. But what I appreciate is that the mechanisms are built into the Escazú Agreement, which means, like I said in the beginning, the agreement literally embodies what it represents. And so it's really good to hear the different avenues and provisions that are made within the agreement. And so happy that you referenced the Antigua and Barbuda example. So my final question for you, looking at other countries that have ratified this agreement, what can we learn from the other Latin American and Caribbean countries to feed into the Jamaican context, or other countries who haven't taken that step as yet?
Yeah, I think a big component of the treaty is that knowledge sharing. And so every year there's either a conference of the parties, which is quite a formal meeting where they make decisions and so on. And then the other year there's a forum for environmental defenders. So this year was a forum for environmental defenders, and it was in St. Kitts. And that's an example of where environmental defenders and those of us who support environmental defenders get together and we share our knowledge on what are the issues we are facing in our countries. And a lot of the issues are the same. And what can we do? So people give advice. So Teresa from JET spoke about how she works with the media, for example. Something for others to learn from, getting information out into the public. But also governments can learn from each other on what they are doing. So they can look at what laws they've put in place, what policies, what systems to manage environmental information are out there, what systems are there to have consultations out in rural areas. One example I'll give, which I find fascinating, is in Latin America, it's very common to use ombudsmen to mediate. So if I am an environmental defender in my community, in Latin America, there's a lot of issues. It's the region of the world where environmental defenders face the most violence and murders. And so if I'm in my community, I can go to the ombudsman and raise my concerns. Whereas here in the English-speaking Caribbean, we have ombudsmen, but they don't deal with environmental matters.
Yeah.
Right?
Conflict.
So I'm like, no, I'm not a lawyer or anything, right? But I'm like, is this something that we could learn from? So not everything needs to go to a court. Maybe ombudsman can play a role in helping to mediate and bring government and the public together to address issues, or can we have some other kind of mediating body? So things like that, very practical examples. We can learn from each other and decide if it does or doesn't work in our own context. What can we adapt? What can we learn, So I think just joining brings all that together. It brings resources to parties. Because once a country has made that commitment, then it attracts resources. There are people who say, we want to support you to support your citizens to have this right, these set of rights. So I think there are a lot of benefits, and taking that step to ratify is just that first step to open up a whole interesting world of really building the country towards this protecting our right to a healthy environment.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I have to say that one of the things I appreciated from how you structured the responses and the insights, it made me look at what it means to take accountability or hold people to account differently. And I'm hoping that our audience has the same impression, because it's not just about holding the stick to say you need to do this, but the angle that you came from is also helpful, because you're saying, how can we collaborate with you to move things forward? And I think when the government and persons in certain positions to make these decisions, I think that's helpful, because a lot of times it's necessary to come upon opposition, and I recall that from our first episode with the CEO of JET, Dr. Teresa Rodriguez Moody. While that is indeed necessary, I think it's helpful when, as you mentioned, when civil society, the momentum and the push is also saying, we want to see you take this step, and so we are prepared to do what is necessary and to help you. So thank you so much for coming on and giving us that kind of perspective that is needed. And I think no matter how many times we speak about the Escazú Agreement, I feel like obviously so fitting that as we wind down the series, we get a new look into what it represents, and the fact that there are a lot of mechanisms that are really designed to do what the treaty says. Encourage and facilitate meaningful decision making and meaningful public participation. And so I think we are a little bit more encouraged that to help our countries move from intention to implementation. And so we want to thank you for also sharing that it's not just about the legal step. And, it's a signal that all of these things, all of the pillars, access to information, justice, participation, they matter. And so we need a stronger political will, and we need, I don't know, clearer timelines, but definitely the inclusion of all voices for us to move and get the conversation going. So thanks again, Nicole. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in and sticking with us, especially if you've listened to all our episodes so far, or even if this is the first. We encourage you to go back and listen to the rest of episodes in this series, and to learn more about the Defending Our Rights Environmental Justice campaign. Visit the JET website, or follow JET at Jamaica Trust or Environmental Defenders JA, where you get all the information on the Escazú Agreement. Thank you so much.